Rare protests are spreading across China. Why? COVID lockdowns. People are calling for Xi Jinping to resign, to leave power, because the zero COVID policy is not working. And more importantly, there's a tragic story. A tower caught fire. People were trapped inside. Because of the zero COVID policy, it was difficult for firefighters to get in and rescue them, and many died. This inspired, triggered, whatever you want to call it, a large wave of protests, but people had already been fed up. It's just another piece of an ongoing crisis. China is reeling from this, and the people who are protesting are taking great risks because this country it's a brutal dictatorship. It's not the brutalest of brutal dictatorships, but it is. I mean, you can certainly look back at history in the Soviet Union. You can look back at, say, Weimar Germany and what it turned into as an encroaching power came to be, and realize the danger that comes with the consolidation of power in a country like China. If the people don't stand up now, then they will forever hold their peace. We've seen terrifying videos out of the COVID lockdowns. Recently in Disney, I think it was Disneyland or was it Disney World? In China, they tested somebody, comes back with a fever, so they lock the place down and everyone's trapped inside. That's how insane it is there. Now, interestingly, there's an overlap with these United States and, of course, potential for war with China. But when these protests started erupting, many people started cheering on the protesters for pushing back against the Chinese government. And I'm glad they did. And within minutes, so I hear, on Twitter, a spam campaign from Chinese state actors started to obfuscate information about the protests. Because that's what bots and manipulation do. That's what they're for. Elon Musk has to deal with this, and it's one of the reasons he wants to get rid of the bots, to prevent manipulation, campaigns, psyops, etc. The media is coming out and saying, oh, look at what Twitter's struggling to deal with this. But the funny thing is, the very people who are mad about Elon Musk taking over Twitter supported Chinese-style COVID lockdowns. You being locked in your house, you starving. There are photos that came out of China for the past several years, people pushing their refrigerator onto their balcony, opening the door and showing no food available. That's how bad it's been. And there were people in the U.S. saying, well, China's doing something right. You had those statements from Trudeau a while ago where he was saying that he looks up to China and Xi Jinping and what they've accomplished. And it's horrifying. Then you take a look at why they're really mad at Elon Musk. He can't deal with the Chinese spam campaign. Part of it's pro-establishment. There are American interests that don't want China to succeed. But part of it is they really like what China's accomplished. You know, we were told on Timcast IRL that what happened was a long time ago, some Democrats met with Chinese officials and said, how are you able to destroy a city block of residential areas and turn it into an industrial area with a snap of a finger? We need to be able to do that. Yes. Trampling over an individual's human rights for political power and to expand. There are many politicians in the U.S. and Canada, especially in Europe, who want that kind of style, but they don't want China to be the ones in charge. So they're at a crossroads. Protests erupt in China. They got to support it. At the same time, they can't allow Elon Musk to allow free speech, can they? They'd have to shut it down. Because if the people can speak freely, this is what you get. And that's why China is trying to stop people from talking about what's happening there with the protests. It will encourage more people to rise up and push back and say no to the extreme authoritarianism. So many of these people who like what China's doing have no choice but to condemn the bots and the manipulation and support the protests, but at the same time agree with eliminating free speech. An article from The Guardian, it's funny, they said, free speech at all costs is dangerous and Elon Musk is proving it. No, the right of the people to protest and resist tyranny is paramount. So let's read what's going on. We got the story from CNN, my friends. But before we do get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to support our work directly. Click that Join Us button and you'll get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, as well as our Friday Green Room show with many of our prominent guests behind the scenes, as well as Cass Castle Vlog, Tales from the Inverted World. And you will be supporting our efforts to expand and invest in cultural works, not just political. So don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share this show with your friends. Without further ado, what's going on? Oh, CNN. CNN's going to tell us, here's what you need to know. Now, I don't like CNN. I don't find them trustworthy. But I'll tell you this. There is an interest among the establishment to see China fail. Not all of them, some of them. So let's start with CNN's perspective on what's happening. They report, from Shanghai to Beijing, protests have erupted across China in a rare show of dissent against the ruling Communist Party, sparked by anger over the country's increasingly costly zero COVID policy. As numbers swelled at demonstrations in multiple major cities over the weekend, so too have the range of grievances voiced, with some calling for greater democracy and freedom. Among the thousands of protesters, hundreds have even called for the removal of Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who for nearly 3 years has overseen a strategy of mass testing, brute force lockdowns, enforced quarantine, and digital tracking that has come at a devastating human and economic cost. Here's what we know. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now that's interesting to come from CNN. The lockdowns came at a devastating human cost. The digital tracking. You mean all those things people like you were supporting? Oh, spare me. The people who work at CNN would jump at the opportunity to have digital passports, lockdowns, and enforced quarantine. Sure. But why are they protesting? The protests were triggered by a deadly fire last Thursday at Urumqi, the capital of the far western region of Xinjiang. The blaze killed at least 10 people and injured 9 in an apartment building, leading to public fury after videos of the incident appeared to show lockdown measures had delayed firefighters from reaching the victims. The city had been under lockdown for more than 100 days, with residents unable to leave the region and many forced to stay home. Videos showed Urumqi residents, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, mind you, Urumqi residents marching to a government building and chanting for the end of lockdown on Friday. The following morning, the local government said it would lift the lockdown in stages, but did not provide a clear time frame or address the protests. That failed to quell public anger, and the protests rapidly spread beyond Xinjiang. Xinjiang? I'm pronouncing it wrong, guys, I know. With the residents in cities and universities across China also taking to the streets. They say protests have been reported across the country. So far, CNN has verified demonstrations in at least 16 locations nationwide, including 2 of China's biggest cities, the capital Beijing and financial center Shanghai. In Shanghai on Saturday, hundreds gathered for a candlelight vigil on Urumqi Road, named after the Xinjiang city, to mourn the fire victims. Many held up blank sheets of white paper, a symbolic protest against censorship, and chanted, "Need human rights, need freedom." I'm right there with you, man. Bravo, bravo. These people who are protesting, the response from the Chinese government to protests is nothing like the U.S. It is substantially worse. We've seen videos of people who posted naughty words online. Oh, they don't get censored. They get renditioned. They get dragged into police black sites, strapped to a chair and beaten, and then said, "Now, you don't want to say those things again, do you?" These people are taking tremendous risk, but together they're strong. Some also shouted for Xi to step down and sang the Internationale, a socialist anthem used as a call to action in demonstrations worldwide for more than a century. It was also used during pro-democracy protests in Tiananmen Square in Beijing before a brutal crackdown by armed troops in 1989. China's zero COVID policies have been felt particularly acutely in Shanghai, where a 2-month-long lockdown earlier this year left many without access to food, medical care, or other basic supplies, sowing deep public resentment. By Sunday evening, mass demonstrations had spread to Beijing, Chengdu, Guangzhou, and Wuhan, where thousands of residents called for not only an end to COVID restrictions, but more remarkably, political freedoms. Residents in some lockdown neighborhoods tore down barriers and took to the streets. Protests also took place on campuses, including the prestigious institutions of Peking University and Tsinghua University in Beijing, and Communication University of China at Nanjing. In recent days, vigils and demonstrations in solidarity with those on the mainland have also been held elsewhere around the world, including London and Sydney. In Hong Kong, where a national security law imposed by Beijing in 2020 had been used to stifle dissent, dozens of people gathered on Monday evening in the city's central district for a vigil. Some held blank pieces of paper, while others left flowers and held signs commemorating those killed in the Urumqi fire. It's probably Urumqi. Probably, definitely pronouncing it wrong. I read a story that really broke down why these protests are significant, but more importantly, why they happened. And I do find it particularly interesting. Now, CNN goes in to explain why they're significant, but I'll tell you the story that I read. I don't have it pulled up. It said that there was a building, and they got word that they were being locked down in this one particular building. But no official paperwork was filed. No enforcement actually happened. They were just told, hey, you're on lockdown. And people are like, there's nobody here. So they left, went about their daily business, came to and fro. Then one day they said, oh, wait, here we have the paperwork. Now, you understand why people don't trust this at this point. They said, you told us we were locked down. You didn't file the proper paperwork. You didn't get it done in time. We were free to come and go as we please. And we did. When you were claiming there was a problem with COVID, nothing significant happened with COVID. And now you're coming by and saying we can't leave. That sounds fake. Right? If it was an emergency, they would have rushed in, locked the building down. Instead, they were like, no, we'll get to it. So imagine you have an actual pandemic and they're like, you're locked down, but we're not going to enforce it. No one's going to believe you. So then when people actually die from this, they're like, we know you're playing games. And that's exactly what they said. They're saying lockdown's a game. It's not real. They wanted the same thing here in the U.S. CNN says, public protest is exceedingly rare in China, where the Communist Party has tightened its grip on all aspects of life, launched a sweeping crackdown on dissent, wiped out much of civil society, and built a high-tech surveillance state. The mass surveillance system is even more stringent on Xinjiang, where the Chinese government is accused of detaining up to 2 million Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in camps, where former detainees have alleged they were physically and sexually assaulted. This is a brutal dictatorship. Don't you forget it. A damning UN report in September described the region's invasive surveillance network with police databases containing hundreds of thousands of files with biometric data, such as facial and eyeball scans. China has repeatedly denied accusations of human rights abuses in the region. Ah, yes, I love it. Allow me to introduce you all to the United States of America. Remember when that dude went, who was it? He went before, I'm blanking on the name, Congress and said, we do not have mass spying. And then Edward Snowden leaked a bunch of files and proved the NSA was mass spying on Americans because they're liars. China does a lot of bad things. A lot. I think they are particularly bad. Their government, the Chinese people actually are really cool, inventing a whole lot of really awesome stuff, but they are under a brutal dictatorship right now. America does bad things as well. I'm not here to play games, nor fall for the tricks where I would begin to loathe my own country. There's problems with my country, but the United States of America is effing amazing. We don't get renditioned and brutally beaten for speaking out against the government. I can say that Joe Biden is a crackpot, his son's a crackhead, and is abusing the DOJ to arrest his political enemies and torture them politically. Ain't nobody's going to kick my door down and arrest me. Yeah, I know. There are problems. They do. We are seeing the DOJ go after people. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we're worse than China. China is very, very bad. But there are elements in the United States, establishment elements, that like the invasive surveillance network, that like eminent domain, that like the weaponization of law enforcement for political ends. And if we don't stop them, we will end up exactly this way. Which is why this story is so important. Because maybe I should say it's hope. It grants hope. When even the people of China stand up and say no, it shows you that there is no world in which the brutal dictator can truly win. They can't, because the people will eventually just say no. They go on to say, while protests do occur in China, they rarely happen on this scale, nor take such direct aim at the central government and the nation's leader, said Maria Repnikova, an associate professor at Georgia State University who studies Chinese politics and media. This is a different type of protest from the more localized protests we have seen recurring over the past 2 decades that tend to focus their claims and demands on local officials and on very targeted societal and economic issues. Instead, this time the protests have expanded to include the sharper expression of political grievances alongside with concerns about COVID-19 lockdowns. There have been growing signs in recent months that the public has run out of patience with zero COVID after nearly 3 years of economic hardship and disruption to daily life. Isolated pockets of protest broke out October with anti-zero COVID slogans appearing on the walls of public bathrooms and in various Chinese cities, inspired by a banner hung by a lone protester on an overpass in Beijing just days before Xi cemented a third term in power. A third term that many say he's basically king for life. Donald Trump had that quote from a while ago, where he said he met Xi and said, "You're king." And he said, no, I'm just a president. He said, no, you're not. You're king. You're president for life. That's what you are. We talked about this on IRL. He's not a king because a king can transfer power. He can't. He's in charge. But when he dies, it's not going to his kid. The parties, and this is a communist thing outright. I mean, they don't believe in the family. But we'll see. You do have North Korea where they do. It's basically a monarchy, right? They say earlier in November, larger protests took place in Guangzhou, with residents defying lockdown orders to topple barriers and cheer as they took to the streets. While protests in several parts of China appear to have largely dispersed peacefully over the weekend, some met a stronger response from authorities. The Shanghai protests on Saturday led to scuffles between demonstrators and police, with arrests made in the early hours of the morning. Undeterred, protesters returned on Sunday, where they met a more aggressive response. Videos show chaotic scenes of police pushing, dragging, and beating protesters. At one point, hundreds of police officers formed a human wall to block off major roads, with a loudspeaker blaring a message for protesters to leave. The videos have since been scrubbed from the Chinese internet by censors. BBC journalist Edward Lawrence was arrested in Shanghai on Sunday night, with the BBC spokesperson claiming he was beaten and kicked by the police while covering the protests. He has since been released. Let me just pause there. I love seeing these stories. This stuff happens in the U.S. all the time. I don't trust these journalists. Sorry. There are many good journalists. There are many bad ones. I think there happen to be more bad ones in the U.S. than good ones. I don't know what this guy was doing, but I got to tell you, having been on the ground in many places, I have been detained myself. I was arrested along with the Trump protesters when he was being inaugurated, and I was released from the crowd without being processed. Oh, were they spitting and yelling something fierce, angry? You weren't really arrested. Arrested does not mean processed, but they don't know that. And there are people saying, Tim, being detained is not processed, is not being arrested. No. Arrested is when they say you have committed a crime, you are not free to leave. Detained is when we're investigating a crime, you can't leave for 45 minutes. No, I was arrested and held for a little while. Showed my press card and they said, okay, fine, you can leave. Arrest over. It happens in the U.S., but again, I'll stress this. These are the games they'd like to play. China loves to say things like, but America's racist. Look at the horrible things they do. Latching onto wokeness and using it against us. No, in fact, woke people take advantage of what is truly good about this country, that we're willing to listen, where we are willing to listen, we are willing to change, and that good faith gets exploited. They say, on Monday, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry acknowledged Lawrence's arrest, claiming he had not identified himself as a journalist before being detained. Spare me. I don't believe the Chinese government on that one. The spokesperson also deflected questions about the protests, telling a reporter who asked whether the widespread displays of public anger would make China consider ending zero COVID. What you mentioned does not reflect what actually happened. He also claimed that social media posts linking the Xinjiang fire with COVID policies had ulterior motives, and that authorities have been making adjustments based on the realities on the ground. When asked about protesters calling on Xi to step down, he replied, "I'm not aware of the situation you mentioned." Ha ha ha. In Xinjiang, top party officials convened a meeting on Saturday, a day after the protests broke out at Urumqi, maybe, where they called the authorities. Normally, I got to be honest, I do look up pronunciations. I do the research and make sure I'm pronouncing the words right. So apologies. I just want to point out that today has been a particularly stressful workday. A lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you will find out about later, but good things, meaning I've been on the phone nonstop, and so I'm doing what I can. But anyway, let's continue. Without referring to the protests, Beijing's municipal government on Sunday banned blocking entrances to residential compounds under lockdown, saying they must remain clear for emergency services. Okay, well, let's talk about what's going on as it relates to more domestic policies. This is funny. Twitter grapples with Chinese spam obscuring news of protests. For hours, links to adult content overwhelmed other posts from cities where dramatic rallies escalated. Yeah, I'll say it outright. Elon, that's a problem. You got to stop the bots. You got to stop the manipulation campaigns. And I know that's his goal. So I'm chilling, hoping he does. But Twitter being a vehicle for the people of China to spread the word and tell us what's going on in their country is good. If it comes to the point where they seek to overthrow the Communist Party, I want to make sure that we, at the very least, can express messages of support in response and know what's happening. Now, I'd be concerned about getting involved in foreign entanglements. That's a fair point. I don't want the U.S. to get involved in China. But what about an opportunity to end the Chinese Communist Party? An opportunity to restore the Republic of China? That would prevent World War III, but not if it means risking war with China and starting World War III. So you got to wonder about what U.S. intelligence interests are here. The Washington Post reports Twitter's radically reduced anti-propaganda team grappled on Sunday with a flood of nuisance content in China that researchers said was aimed at reducing the flow of news about stunning widespread protest against coronavirus restrictions. Numerous Chinese language accounts, some dormant for months or years, came to life early Sunday and started spamming the service with links to escort services and other adult offerings alongside city names. Amazing. The result, for hours, anyone searching for posts from those cities and using the Chinese names for the locations would see pages and pages of useless tweets instead of information about the daring protests as they escalated to include calls for Communist Party leaders to resign. It's brilliant, honestly, because a lot of people don't want to see the graphic content and they won't want to search these terms. And also it means that if you share those searches, people might inadvertently see nasty things. That can get you banned. They're exploiting our good faith in this country. Same as the woke. It is not the first time that suspected government-connected accounts have used the technique, according to a recently departed Twitter employee. But in the past, it was used to discredit a single account or a small group by naming them in the escort ads. Amazing. This is a known problem that our team was dealing with manually, aside from automations we put in place, said the former employee, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to avoid retribution for disclosing internal processes. In the mass layoffs and resignations, Twitter's overall staff has been slashed from about 7,500 to 2,000. Surviving employees estimated. Some groups, including those dealing with human rights issues, safety concerns, and deceptive foreign influence operations, have been reduced to a handful of people or no staff at all. Sunday's campaign was another exhibit where there are now even larger holes to fill. All the China influence operations and analysts at Twitter all resigned. Oof. The campaign was spotted by researchers at Stanford University. Full stop. Stanford lies. So I don't believe it. I'm not going to sit here and defend China. They do stuff like this, but Stanford lies. Stanford's the one that made up that list of, I think it was, okay, I could be wrong. And so I apologize if that's the case. Let me backtrack and say, my understanding is that it was Stanford who put together a list of people they said was spreading misinformation about the election. If that's not the case, well, I apologize. But I recall reading a report about it, and I'm pretty sure they're the ones who was smearing me. And you know what? Let me just double check. Let me make sure I have the details right. Super spreaders, I think they called it. And I'm pretty sure it was Stanford. And bear with me for just one moment as I pull up this news story. And was it Stanford EIP? Yep, it was Stanford. Okay, now that I'm confirmed, I can say they lie. So I want to make sure I have the details correct because I don't normally like to say things unless I know for a fact they're true. But they called me a super spreader, and that's ridiculous. I've repeatedly said Trump didn't win. But I was talking about news related to things like in New Jersey where there were significant problems that resulted in a new election. Uh-oh. So forgive me if I don't believe them now when they're saying, oh, the bots from China. Yeah, sure. Intelligence interests, perhaps, they say. Stanford Internet Observatory Director Alex Stamos said his team is working to determine how widespread and effective it is. I don't know if I believe them. I got to be honest. By late Sunday, news and images of the protests were showing up in searches for posts in cities where rallies were being held. 50% porn, 50% protests, said one U.S. government contractor and China expert. I'll pause right there and just say, interesting. Okay. First, China does this. Fair point. We know they do this. They've done it for a long time. They hacked Google and things like that. But I'm not going to believe that their intentions are pure. Take a look at this. From The Guardian. Elon Musk's Twitter is fast proving that free speech at all costs is a dangerous fantasy. Nesreen Malik. Reinstating the likes of Donald Trump and Kanye West looks likely to turn the social media site into an extremist ghetto. These people are evil people. They think they're smarter than you. They think they're better than you. They think you don't have a right to speak. So when the establishment elites come out, the U.S. intelligence agencies, and they say outright, China is spamming, Elon's making mistakes. Oh, okay. You're the people who want to shut down free speech. Why would I believe you? She writes for The Guardian. Free speech absolutists are like the cocky audience of a spectator sport. They think they could do better than the players if they were just allowed a crack at it. Oh, you are going to love this one, I can tell. To them, speech should be as free as possible, period. Nowhere in their oversimplification of the issue more evident than on social media, where abuse and disinformation have created a new frontier of regulation, and with it a cohort of disingenuous free speech warriors. These absolutists are so unaccustomed to facing consequence for their actions that they have pushed the idea that censoring a woke orthodoxy now prevails and is a threat to freedom of expression. Huh? Elon Musk is among them. But since his takeover of Twitter, he is having to learn quickly that free speech is not simply about saying whatever you want, unchecked, but about negotiating complicated compromises. No, free speech is about expressing yourself however you want. And no one ever argued freedom of speech includes a freedom from consequence. That's a lie. They made it up. They made it up because it's a buzz phrase. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. Said literally no free speech advocate ever. Quite in fact, they argue that free speech comes with responsibility and consequences. They say, Musk arrived at Twitter with an approach that I am sure he thinks is pretty straightforward. The side he believes has a left-wing bias that should be corrected by allowing suspended users back on the platform. Trump, Kanye West, Jordan Peterson have been reinstated, along with nearly all those that were suspended for falling afoul of Twitter's rules. No, that's not true. That may be true this week, but we'll see. This means that Twitter is about to turn into a far more unpleasant and potentially dangerous experience. Let me correct the record. Right now, you have articles claiming that China is operating psychological operations. They're running psyops. So he certainly didn't stop people who are already there doing things they've already been doing. Those accounts were there for months and years before Elon took over. There was Antifa organizing violence, directing violence, and encouraging violence, and y'all never cared about that. You said, but free speech. Okay. Well, now we want rules because we don't want the violence. But now they're claiming that free speech is violence, not the violence they were actually calling for. Yeah, spare me. Here we go. Like Trump, Musk has become the tribune of fascists and racists by way of adolescent contrarianism, an insatiable need to flaunt his control and a radicalizing inability to cope with being told he's wrong on the internet. For him, free speech seems merely a vehicle for his delusional plan to make Twitter into a fawning digital town square that he presides over. I wish that we could get a philosopher king to actually run things, but we can't. And if we can't, then we want rules. And rules must be fair and impartial so we understand the rules by which we play. But not even the richest man in the world can pull that sort of free speech arena off. Twitter isn't sustained by previously suspended users, but by the millions of people for whom the platform feels like a political and cultural slipstream. Twitter has an odd social media profile. It is both extremely influential and also quite trivial. And the coexistence of the two is what makes the site viable. Twitter is a window into the soul of politicians and opinion makers. Its style of interactive rolling commentary works well in drawing them out to post their views or engage with others, revealing personalities and politics that otherwise would be suppressed or closely edited. Hey, wait a minute. You mean like Alex Jones, Milo, Laura Loomer, Donald Trump, Jordan Peterson, Carl Benjamin? How about Carpe Donktum and others who have not yet been reinstated? These are people who would otherwise be suppressed, and you're advocating they are. The hypocrisy in their own words, the article is a paradox itself. So when U.S. interests come out and claim that China does wrong, I simply say, spare me your agenda. Sure, you want China silenced, but you also want your political opponents here silenced as well. I won't believe it. Here we go. If you're not on Twitter, chances are that you have come across stories that started out or were precipitated there. Whether it's a debate on trans rights that swirls around J.K. Rowling's tweets, or calls to organize street protest against dictators in the Arab world, or in China. For all these things to be possible on the same site, robust content moderation is necessary to ensure conversations don't descend into doxing and hateful conduct, which the left does, has always done, and they don't get banned for. I had someone post my address a long time ago. They didn't take it down. I moved from that address, and now the left is doxing that address where I don't live. They started taking many of these things down. Some of them they don't take down. Don't ask me why. Elon, you got to figure that one out, buddy. Figure it out. Good luck. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. But doxing already happens. So acting like this is a new thing is a lie. They're now trying to say, look what they're taking advantage of. If you're not on Twitter, chances are you've come across stories. They're going after people who don't use a social platform, and they're lying to them so that these people live in this world where they have absolute control. They say when a place is not fun or hospitable or truthful, it becomes commercially pointless for advertisers. Since Musk took over, half of Twitter's top 100 advertisers have reported to have left the site. If things continue as they are, it's hard to see a future for the company. No, not at all. It's actually easy. Twitter is not a complicated machine. It's very, very simple, actually. Elon's gutting core systems that are unnecessary, pulling out bloatware and firing unnecessary staff like a human rights team. Dude, you post text and it goes on the internet. What do you need a human rights team for that? Advertisers will want to be on the platform. And here's how I explain it. In the town square, there's a billboard for Planned Parenthood. Some guy shows up with a big old sign and he protests. Is Planned Parenthood going to take their sign down because someone protested? No, of course not. But now their sign is next to a guy with a nasty picture of a baby. Yeah, they're going to keep advertising. Coca-Cola puts up a big old billboard in the city. And Times Square, how about that? A guy showed up and slashed them with a knife in Times Square. Do you want to advertise next to all that content? They are. They never stopped. They still want to. No one ever says, why is that M&M's ad appearing next to that man slashing that woman? Because they recognize that's nothing to do with the ad or where it is. But for some reason on Twitter it is? Because activists have begun targeting it. These woke activists may as well be the Chinese Communist Party as far as I'm concerned. Psychological operations and manipulation. Someone tweets a naughty word. An advertisement appears a tweet later. And they say, look, you're next to it. That means you. No, I didn't advertise on that and I don't care. Some person said something dumb. It has nothing to do with me. My tweet is my tweet. This is the game they want to play. They want the authority to control the narrative. And that means stopping China from trying to control the narrative, but retaining the power for themselves. I don't want to live in that world. Y'all are insane. So we push back. We support the people of China. We call out the psychological operations from China. But we also call out the psyops and sock puppetry from the U.S. itself as well. I can't say what will happen in China because, as you know, I am no psychic and I'm only reading the news. There's probably a lot I don't know. There's probably a lot you need to know as the story develops. There is a potential that there will be a war between the U.S. and China. China's preparing for war. They've been. If the people of China can rise up and tear down the Chinese Communist Party, it may mean no war. It may mean the relations between the U.S. and China improve. But it's possible it means they sour as well. I don't know. But I support freedom, individuality, and meritocracy. And that means the people protesting are right. I'll leave it there. Next segment will be tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. You don't want to miss it.